All right. Welcome, everyone, to the September STC Florida chapter meeting. I am so glad you're all here to join us for our session on inclusive technical editing, how, why, and when to use alternative style guides with Jonathan Arnett. We have some updates from the Florida chapter before the presentation, but just want to note that this is being recorded, so we'll be sharing it on our YouTube channel. So if you have to drop off, you can always catch the recording later. Throughout the presentation, or at least through my slides, you're welcome to put things in the chat. I would like to thank our Vice President, Julia, who does a great job providing helpful links, monitoring the chat, providing responses. So, feel free to stay active there. So without further ado, let me go over our agenda. Thanks to everyone who joined 6:30 to 7 for our networking session. We do that every chapter meeting where we chit chat about the weather, tech comm, technology, and anything else that comes up along the way. If you are looking for a job, we also are happy to hear from you there, or if you're hiring for a job. And I know we have a further slide with a little update from our employment chair. So we're going to be just doing our welcome and announcements, like I mentioned, introducing our presenter. Then we'll have the presentation Q&A and then a closing. So pretty straightforward stuff. All right, welcome from the STC Florida chapter. I will remember to introduce myself. I'm notorious for forgetting. I know you can see my name in Zoom, but my name is Bethany Aguad. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the president of the chapter. We are the Florida chapter of the Society for Technical Communication, and we are glad you're here, whether you are in Florida or beyond. Not that we don't have Florida behind us on our backgrounds, Julia and I, but we are happy to connect with people in other states as we continue to host all of our programs virtually. So every month we get together with our fellow passionate technical communicators to do educational programming. We also have some virtual networking we do every month, and we're just glad that you're here with us and spending your time as part of our community. So thank you for being here. First off, I have a little bit of chapter news from Julia.
Hey everyone, I'm Julia Southwick. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the chapter vice president, communications chair, and newsletter editor. Over the past couple months, we unfortunately had some technological snafus that made it so we couldn't run Memo to Members, our newsletter. But I am happy to say it is back. So if you're looking to get published, if you want to write about TechCom, give me an email, and if you want to write but don't know what about, see our ideas page. I will put the link in chat for you.
Yeah, and I have to thank Julia for her patience. I know she's been waiting anxiously to share some of our community updates and posts from our members. So please feel free to work with her at any point. She is a kind, understanding, and empathetic editor and a joy to work with. And if you are looking to add some things to your portfolio, it doesn't hurt to have some links from our website that you can include. And also, if you're trying to improve your search engine optimization, not all of us are blessed/cursed with unique names that make us inescapable on the internet, but it's always good to be able to have things that are positive and showing your commitment to your profession. So a few other updates. I won't give the full pitch on our mentoring program, but for those who are not aware, every year we do a joint program with the Future Technical Communicators Student Club at the University of Central Florida, where we pair students with professionals, either in our community or in other STC communities or friends, to help them make that transition from being a student to entering the profession as technical communicators. That runs fall to spring and sometimes beyond. Julia and I were mentor and mentee. And the only reason I say we aren't now is because now I think Julia teaches me much more than I teach her, now that our roles have, have grown over time. But it's a great place if you're looking as a mentee to prepare to enter the profession, learn what it's like working in industry, ask those questions that you're afraid to ask your professors. Not that they're scary, but sometimes I know it can be intimidating. And also just to build connections and start to network with people. Because when I first was a student, I joined STC, the mentoring program, because I was terrified that I would have a good GPA and no job on graduation and no idea for how to get one besides sending my resume to people and hoping that they would talk to me. So it really helped me build my confidence in my skills and my networks that I have been consistently employed since graduation, which I think for many of us is the dream. For those who have been experienced professionals, we are looking for mentors. You do not have to be a member of our chapter, but we're looking for anyone who has a few years of experience and is looking to put some time and energy into, sharing their knowledge with a student. You do not have to have all the answers. As I mentioned, I was Julia's mentor, but now she teaches me more than I teach her. So it's more about being able to share what you have experienced, what you've learned, do's and do nots, and also help your mentee, navigate that time of transition. So our mentor application form is open. If you are looking to participate, we ask that you complete it. I'm going to put it in the chat, and we're looking to have that done by October 3rd. So if you do apply, we review those applications, and then we pair the mentors and mentees based on areas of interest and skills, with ideally finding a match where, the mentee that we would pair you with as a mentor is someone who's looking to learn some of the things that you've experienced in your career. So if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And I know many of our potential mentors do suffer from imposter syndrome. I say this as someone who was in that position thinking, I cannot mentor someone. I still have so much to learn. Please do not let that hold you back. It's a very rewarding experience. It's been one of my favorite parts of being an STC. So other than that, I wanted to mention that we have been working on our Discord community. So we were trying to find a way to engage asynchronously between chapter meetings. I love seeing your friendly faces at chapter meetings, at networking sessions, but I know sometimes it just communicating through email can be a little disconnected. So we now have this Discord server with channels set up where you can ask questions, get feedback, and we also host our networking socials there at the moment. So we are happy to chat with you. Anyone is welcome to join. That is free. You do not have to be a chapter member to participate there, but please consider it. We also want to announce that the STC membership season is open. So if you are a member of STC and hopefully of our community, it's time to renew for 2024. If you are not a member, you can join for 2024. I won't go over all the benefits of STC, but I will be sending out emails reminding you of the educational benefits. You'll have access to like intercom, technical communication. The only way I have stayed up to date on TechCom is by reaching out beyond my job, because shockingly, none of the jobs I've been part of have helped me stay up to date on TechCom. They just want me to work. So I hope you'll continue to consider that part of your professional development. And if you do join, reminder, if you would like to be part of our community, you do have to select us. And as Alex always points out, if you are looking through the list of communities to join when you're joining STC, we used to be the Orlando Central Florida chapter, and due to a website snafu, we still appear where we would under O, not under F. So you'll have to scroll to a weird spot alphabetically to find the Florida chapter, but we are there on the STC website. Just a preview of some of our upcoming meetings. One is with the FTC, the Future Technical Communicators Student Club. I wanted to thank Joy for reminding us to help promote this event that she said STC members are welcome to attend on personal branding with Susan Kelly. So that'll be Tuesday, October 3rd on Zoom. And you are welcome to join that. We also have our virtual networking meeting, like I mentioned, on Discord. So we host those every month on the second Tuesday. Julia is nodding because she helps me keep track of dates. It's one of my challenges that she has been helping me address. So anyone is welcome to join there. We chat TechCom, work experience, venting, sharing, asking advice. It's always a good time. We also have our administrative council meetings. So when I say administrative council, or as I often say, ADCO, for those of us who've been in the chapter, we abbreviate it and then we forget to explain it. That is our officers, committee chairs, and those of us who are doing the chapter business. If you are interested in becoming a more active volunteer or just seeing how we run the chapter, anyone is welcome to join. Those are open to anyone. So if you are interested, just let me know in the chat. And our next one will be on Thursday, October 12th. All right, don't worry, we're close to the end of me just talking at you. You're about to be free of me, but just a couple more things.
I'm just testing my new phone.
Oh, hey, I just heard a voice. I didn't see what it was.
I'll mute myself.
No worries. So for October, normally we would have a single educational program, but we actually are having a special series of programs from Joanna Donovan. She has her own business, Propel Resume and Career Services, and she is doing a series of sessions on career strategy and learning. So if you are interested in learning how to polish up your resume, approach the job search, prepare for an interview, she's going to be doing 3 sessions in October and into November. So the 19th, 26th, and November 2nd. Diving into those topics and answering your questions. She regularly does resume reviews to help people find places in the profession or to navigate career changes. And she has been very generous to offer this much of her time to our community as someone who has benefited, especially I think from the mentoring program. So we will be sending the link for RSVP for that soon. But the plan is that your 3 sessions, you're welcome to attend any and all of them. We encourage you to attend all of them. And they are going to be $5 each. So instead of our regular meeting fees, it'll be a little bit different for that month. but there will be instructions for how to RSVP and sign up. And I believe there will be a potential special prize for people who are very engaged in the sessions, especially if you attend all 3. So I'm really excited to share that. And I also want to thank Nicole, our employment chair, for helping coordinate this series of meetings. So we're very excited about the program. As a reminder, we have been sharing our chapter calendar, so kind of what events we have coming up. I won't go over all of them, but we will always share, updates through our Memo to Members newsletter, on our chapter website, on email, on our Discord, on LinkedIn, all the places you can find us on our events. But excited for our inclusive editing tonight. And then, as I mentioned, the Navigating the Job Climate series in October. And then we'll have a presentation on sort of hybrid roles in November, which will be more about when technical communicators wear multiple hats. Tech writer, tech editor, business analyst, technical communicator, since many of us, have done a dual role in our work experience. And then in this December, as Julie and I were recently discussing, we're planning to do 2 options for our social. We'd like to do an in-person option for those of us who can make it to Orlando, and also a virtual one for those who are joining us from afar. So more details to come. I won't go over the whole calendar now, but looking to continue to see your friendly faces at upcoming events. I did want to include a slide here for Nicole. Nicole, I didn't know if there's anything you want me to add, but I can speak to it if you'd like.
Sorry, I had to unmute. No, I mean, I'm really excited to hear about anyone who's looking for a job and needs help or wants guidance, or, if your company is hiring in a tech comm role, that would be fantastic to know, so we could share it with the group. But yeah, we're really looking forward to the upcoming series and, what all fall and the new quarter will bring.
All right, thanks, Nicole. Nicole recently stepped up this year as our employment chair, and she has been incredibly active. If you want to know about what jobs are available, please do connect with Nicole on LinkedIn. She posts things every day. So anything, if you're looking to just see what's available, she has been a wonderful resource and will continue to be. So thank you, Nicole, so much. All right, I promise you'll be near the end of hearing me talk. We're very close. I wanted to introduce tonight's presenter, Dr. Jonathan Arnett, who is representing, I guess, I don't know if that's the word, a session from the STC Summit. I attended it live at the summit and I took lots and lots of notes, and I've already been trying to implement some of the things he has shared, but I'm very excited to hear the presentation again and for to be shared with you all. He is an associate professor of technical communication at Kennesaw State University, program coordinator, a Bachelor of Science in Technical Communication, an MATC in Technical Communication, and a PhD in Technical Communication and Rhetoric from Texas Tech, and co-author of the textbook Open Technical Communication. So when someone gets to say that they wrote the book on something, he is that person for this topic. So I'm very grateful for his time and to be here to share with us this program, and looking forward to seeing what questions you guys are going to have as we get further along. So I'm going to spotlight video, and I think, Jonathan, you should be able to screen share.
Okay, very good. Thanks very much for having me here. I'm a little bit surprised and overwhelmed, actually, that you saw my presentation and liked it enough that you wanted to bring it here. So I'm very complimented. Thank you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show this presentation. I'll click my way through it, but I'm also in the chat right now. I'm going to put a URL. Make sure this. There it goes. This is my personal website. If you want to get a copy of the slide deck, please feel free to download it. So if you want to download it now and just go through it at the same pace, that's great. If you want to download it later, that's fine. It's in a public folder, it's shared, so please just go for it. Feel free to share it among anybody you know as well. I'd be glad to also answer any questions. So let's begin. What I'm going to do, let's see here. First, I need to press there, and then I need to share my screen, and it'll be sharing that. So I am screen sharing. Quick confirmation, can people see the title slide? Okay, very good. Let's move forward then. So the first thing I want to say is that this presentation is inclusive technical editing, but I want to change a word in the title. I would call it supplementary rather than alternative style guides. And the reason will become obvious as I move along through this. So let's talk about these things, what they are, how they work, and why you should use them. So to begin, we need to talk about some terminology. So there are such things as style guides and style sheets. We need to differentiate between the two. A style guide is something that is authoritative. It is universal. All sorts of people use this, and it's usually put together by an organization. A style sheet, on the other hand, is very local. It is something that you, the technical communicator, would do as part of a project. So you may do it solo, you may do it as part of a work group, but the point being, this is created by this very small group and is a local resource rather than a global resource. These both have very similar things in common. They have rules for example, definitions. How do you spell a particular word? Are we using MLA or APA or CSE format? What sort of verbal tone do we want to use? What are we calling things? What grammar rules do we use? These varieties, these are covered by both. So then, question is, where do you get these things? Style guides are available, well, from the direct from the publisher. For example, this particular doorstop, the Chicago Manual of Style, is 1,144 pages of awesomeness. You can get it from the publisher. You can also go to Amazon.com and order these things. Sometimes your employer will have them. For example, what you see on the screen right now, this is the visual identity page for my employer, Kennesaw State University. So if I want to know, what does my style guide say I have to use for images, for colors, for branding the stuff that I want to put out in the world, it'll be available here. You can also go to advocacy websites. We're going to come back to this idea a little bit later. Style sheets, on the other hand, remember, are very local things, so you're probably not going to receive one. You'll make it. Now, if you join a project, someone may give you a style sheet for the project in question, but all the same, you're probably going to make it. So you start with a blank page, and you start making notes. Thing I want to emphasize here, I'm going to make it blank, is always make a style sheet every time you edit. I know that sometimes I fail to take my own advice, and I always kick myself by the end of the project, like, oh, this came up again. What did I do? And I have to go back and backtrack. Just do yourself a favor. Make notes every time you edit. So the question is then, what should you, the technical communicator, put in a style sheet? You should put such things as, well, everything we've already mentioned. Thing is, though, if you include absolutely everything, then it will not work for you. You have to make sure that you're putting in relevant things. If you make a laundry list of every single edit you make, then that'll be a problem. Some of you may have run into this problem, though, of coworkers, particularly senior coworkers, who demand that you make a list of every single edit you've made and make sure that, so I can go by line by line by line. What exactly did you do about those people? This, I'm not entirely sure. I ran into one, and I just went for the rhetorical strategy of copia, so I overwhelmed them with a massive, massive detailed list. That was my strategy. Yours may differ. But the point is, when you make a style sheet, you want to include things that keep coming up over and over again. For example, what I've included here is a partial style sheet for Technical Editing 4th edition by Carolyn Rood. This is an example from the book that says, hey, these are the things that we had to look for every single time. So for example, email. There's no hyphen in email anymore. We're going to do it this way. For illustration, if we're going to cross-reference in text, we need an initial cap, and they give an example of how to do it. So this sort of thing that comes up over and over again. Also include things that you're unsure of. NEIS, N-E-I or N-I-E, If you don't remember, put it in. And also consistency issues, the visual, spelling, anything at all that's going to come up over and over again that you need to keep looking up, include. You also need to include things that Bill and Ted would do. Now, you're probably wondering, what Bill and Ted, what's going on? So most of you probably remember the cinematic triumph entitled Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. In case you don't, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the plot. So these two fellows here, two dopes from San Dimas, California, Bill S. Preston Esquire and Ted Theodore Logan, their sole goal in life, their overriding passion is they want to start a band. They have a name for it. Wild Stallions, W-Y-L-D-S-T-A-L-L-Y-N-S. Problem is that these two guys are, well, dopes, and they're about to fail out of their history class. If they don't pass their final exam in history, they will be split up, and Ted is going to be shipped off to military academy in Alaska. Problem is, the entire future of the world depends on their music. So the people of the future send a time machine in the shape of a telephone booth back. They give it to Bill and Ted and say, here, Bill and Ted, go around history, collect historical figures, take them to your presentation and pass, and you will save the world. So sure enough, they do. They hopscotch around history, picking up historical figures. At one point, the time machine malfunctions and they get hurtled into the future. Door opens, cloud of smoke. Bill and Ted go outside, look around. Whoa, dude, what's going on? There's beautiful music playing, beautiful architecture, people walking by in fantastic clothes. Well, it's their music. It's architecture inspired by their music. It's clothes inspired by their music. So the people walking past, they look and say, oh, look, it's them. It's the great ones. So Ted, Keanu Reeves, by the way, by far his most convincing role, shoves Bill forward and says, say something intelligent. So Bill looks around a little bit, says, be excellent to each other. And that's what we're talking about here. When we're editing, we need to be excellent to each other. So supplementary style guides that we can use, these alternative style guides, they will help us actually be excellent to each other, particularly if we are not used to communicating with or for other peoples. Now, one of the things I'm going to say before I move on a little bit is that I'm going to out myself as a cisgender heterosexual white fellow. So therefore, when I'm presenting this, this is the angle I'm coming from. Some of the feedback I got when I presented this at STC was, oh, it's a good presentation, but it had a lot of white fragility. I'm just me. I'm trying to present my perspective. So if I come across as somehow defensive, please let me know. I'd like to know how I can improve this presentation and also just present the ideas more effectively. So, but the case being that when we are communicating with different audiences, sometimes we are unsure how to do it. So we need to be excellent to each other and treat each other with respect and dignity. So how can I do this? There's an easy way. You ready for this? Here it comes. Really hard concept. Use a supplemental style guide. Now, this may not be particularly surprising to you, given the title of the presentation, but maybe we ought to talk about what a supplemental style guide is, how one differs from the standard style guide that we've already mentioned, and why you particularly need one. Oh, yeah. And where do you get one? So what I did first for this presentation was I decided, okay, style guides. I wonder how many are out there. So I looked up on Wikipedia and I found this list. If you look at the very top of the list from here to here, this is just a smattering of the ones that are available from the ISO. Now, as technical communicators, we're probably familiar with the ISO, at least know what it is, and we've touched on it before at some point in our careers. So I'm not going to talk about that very much. What I'm going to talk about, though, is the variety of style guides that are available in English. Or better yet, how about just for the USA? There are 54 unique entries here, and of those, 53 of them are fairly standard style guides, and only one is something that we think of as an alternative style guide or a supplemental style guide. The thing is, each of these particular style guides, they're going to focus on a purpose and a particular context of use. So when we start talking about what are these things and where do we see them, what do we use them for, the most common ones in the US, the AP Stylebook and Strunk and White's Elements of Style. I'm familiar that you all have seen these at least once in your lives, yes? So these are often used in business, in PR, in journalism. If you're going to be working in publishing, Chicago is the go-to. If you're going to be working in software, Microsoft has a style guide. It's probably the big one that everybody has to go to. Some of the other common ones you'll encounter, if you're working in the humanities, the MLA. If you're working in the medical field, the AMA. If you're working in something scientific, the Council of Science Editors. If you're working in psychology or some other of the scientific fields that don't use CSE, APA is probably one of the big ones you run into all the time. If you work in religion, for example, SBL. If you work in engineering, you're going to run into the IEEE. And just as a side note, I would suggest that not all of these are of equal quality. Let's say because IEEE was created by the devil, I am absolutely certain. But the point being, you've got all these different style guides, and they're going to guide you toward the things that these particular organizations want and value. So how do supplemental style guides, how do they differ? The big style guides are prescriptive, they're broad. Now, if you're not familiar with the idea of prescriptive, it comes from the idea of imposing rules. It says, you must do this. Now, this is a big thing in linguistics. We talk about dictionaries, for example. Dictionaries are style guides. Should dictionaries be descriptive or prescriptive? Should they be describing the way that people actually use language? Or should they be saying, here is the word, this is how you use it, other ways are wrong? Well, generally speaking, the style guides that we deal with, they are very prescriptive. They say, this is the rule, you must follow the rule. Thing is, a lot of these rules are traditional. They are somewhat arbitrary often, and they may be outdated. They may be exclusionary. So here's a good example. Anybody know what this is? Anybody? Raise your hand and shout it out. I guess I'm presenting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The Starship Enterprise.
Thank you very much. 5 points to Gryffindor. So at this point, we have the Starship Enterprise. You all familiar with the show Star Trek and the various Star Treks? Well, remember, there's always a little saying at the beginning of the show. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission: to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. Well, there are a couple of problems wrong with this, and the first one that my mother, the retired English teacher, would identify is this one right here, the split infinitive. She would refer to it as, quote, a grammatical sin, unquote, and yes, she actually would capitalize that, and I know that because I did a split infinitive in one of my emails to her, and she wrote back and said, blah, 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 and she did this to me, the grammatical sin. Point being, though, why is this wrong? You want to know the reason? If you haven't heard this before, there is absolutely nothing wrong with splitting an infinitive in English. It's just a rule that people made up. Well, who made it up? It's the people who were first codifying English grammar. They were trained in Latin, and it is literally impossible in Latin to split an infinitive because an infinitive is just a single word. You can't split it. So they said, well, the same thing must apply to this Germanic language. So here we go. Here's the rule. And it's stuck for centuries, literally. So there's no good reason to do this. This is an example of one of these traditional rules that has just sort of ossified and been made. So these rules are sometimes outdated. Now there's an exclusionary problem here as well. To boldly go where no man has gone before. Ooh, yeah, women go to space too, don't, oh, hey, how about that? Well, this has been addressed. In the following series, they say to boldly go where no one has gone before. So this particular exclusionary bit has been taken out and fixed. So they're trying to be excellent. Style guides that are supplemental, they a little more up to date. They these big style guides. For example, as I mentioned, this guy, 1,144 pages. It takes a long time to revise this thing. So they can't just keep up and like, oh, we're going to make an update. We're going to make an update. We're going to make an update. They build them and they compile them. They put them in press and then they send them out. But it takes a long, long time. So these alternative and supplemental style guides, they can be up to date on sensitive topics or things that change rapidly. Particular, they talk about and they address the concerns of people who are marginalized historically. For example, victims of crime, populations that are of older people, people who have disabilities, people who are not cisgender, LGBTQ populations, members of non-dominant religions, of ethnic groups, indigenous persons. all of these are, well, frankly, poorly treated many times in our culture and our language. So when we start talking about how to treat people well, we can go to these supplemental style guides and get some ideas. Some people may be asking though, well, okay, that's nice, but do I really need a supplemental style guide? TechCom is fairly neutral. We talk about things a lot. Well, that's somewhat true. But at the same time, I just did a Google search and I found examples. For example, the pros and cons of a manned or unmanned reception desk. Oh yeah, that's kind of sexist language, isn't it? Okay, well, go to software testing. They have a thing called a sanity test. Ooh, yeah, does it really, that's kind of a, yeah. Is asking, does this make sense at all? Does that mean something is insane? That's, yeah, no, we're going to say that. Whitelisting. Does that also imply the list of a blacklist and the idea of white good, black bad? Unfortunately, it does. So perhaps this is sort of language we ought to think about not using. Such a thing as a federal government. Girlshealth.gov. Date rape. Well, it's not really called date rape anymore. This is acquaintance rape or something of the sort. Just calling it date rape seems a little dodgy, but it's the language that is used in vernacular language, so the government still uses it, but it's a little dodgy. I looked online for something medical. So they're talking about getting a first catch urine samples for chlamydia and gonorrhea testing. If you look down at the bottom there, you can't read it very well, but it says for STD testing, we need a dirty collection. Oh, so if you have one of these sexually transmitted infections, you are dirty. That's a problem, right? High school dropouts, again, something we say in the vernacular, but it really is stigmatizing toward people who drop out. Well, even I just said it, drop out of high school, who don't complete the high school. We've got to say something different and be not so stigmatizing. And finally, one of the things I personally like to do, I like to go diving. This is one of my big hobbies. So I looked in scuba diving and see if there's anything I can find that is somehow just, off. And sure enough, from 2015, talking about scientific divers, he or she, his or her, his or her. Well, aren't there trans people who dive? I have met them. So perhaps this is not really inclusive, it's more exclusive. So yeah, the point is, we in technical communication, we really do need to think about inclusion and being awesome to each other. Oh, and this one, it's been going for years. You've seen this before at any point in your working world. Sure, especially in TechCom, we talk about master-slave relationships between devices. Well, that's a bit dodgy. Matter of fact, in 1998, 25 years ago, a couple of people wrote about this in TCQ, and then it only took, I don't know, 22 or 24 years before something came out in the Microsoft Style Guide that says, yeah, maybe it's a good idea not to use the phrase master-slave. But then we also have other problems. For example, the W3C, if you're working the web, you're familiar with this. There is a particular one that you may not think about. So some of the language we use has really racist backgrounds, and we may not realize it. For example, grandfather and legacy. Or what could be possibly wrong with this? We hear it all the time. Something was grandfathered in. Well, in the vernacular, it doesn't mean a whole lot, but where it comes from is somewhat horrifying because in the South in particular, it comes from the idea of who was allowed to vote. Laws were passed that, well, if your grandfather could vote, of course you can vote. Well, whose grandfathers couldn't vote? The former slaves on the planet. Right. So then they can't vote, and they were able to put up literacy tests, poll taxes, and the like to keep them from voting. So even language that we use every day can have problematic meanings. So then, we've determined that technical communicators really can use supplemental style guides. Question is, where do you get them? Well, as we talked about before, there are a bunch of varieties of places you can obtain them, but one of the ones I'm going to suggest for supplemental style guides is advocacy websites. So some of these things, by the way, one of the easy ways to find it, get a keyword and type in style guide. This is what I did. I did a Google search and I came up with all sorts of really cool ones. For example, there is about disabilities, Council of the Blind, Asian American journalists, LGBTQ journalists, Dyslexia Association, disability rights. It goes on. And this is just a short list of the ones that are out there. So, oh, there it is. Again, this is a short list of the ones that are out there. Thing is, these also frequently link to each other. So if you find one, you can scroll through it and it'll often have links to, here are some other style guides, click, 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 click. It's a really nice way of finding more. So if you can't find what you're looking for immediately, start clicking. Odds are you'll stumble upon something pretty quickly. Oh yes, and blogs, they, well, I put the word borrow, but I think plagiarize to a massive extent is probably a better way to phrase it. They just take chunks from these and put them in their own materials. So you'll find lots of blogs out there that have style guide materials that come from these particular supplemental style guides. So what are some of the big ones, though? The ones I would suggest looking for first are the Conscious Style Guide. It has all sorts of materials for many marginalized audiences. Diversity Style Guide, very similar. GLAD, gay and lesbian mostly oriented. And this one may surprise you a little bit. This is one of the big ones, but the APA is really progressive. And matter of fact, they have a nice little book, The Concise Guide to APA Style. It has all sorts of really good materials. And this is one I use when I'm trying to teach students how to be inclusive in their language. It's also, by the way, I should say, fairly inexpensive. So this is a neat one to buy. Some of the commonalities of the alternative style guides, they try to teach you how to avoid biased language, how to avoid biased images, how to avoid stereotypes, how to avoid language that stigmatizes people, how to show that people are equal. And also, one of the big ones, show details when appropriate, not just because you can. And some of the last ones, do your homework. I'm going to just emphasize this. Do your homework. If you have questions, ask. If you don't know for sure, look it up. And the last one I'm going to talk about is doing your best. So let's talk just a little briefly about avoiding biased images and language. This is one we're all familiar with. This is the handicapped placard. Yes, we've seen it many times, and I've got some sample text here. Handicapped parking is available outside the Stauffer Building's east entrance. Seems relatively okay, right? But handicapped parking, is there a better way we could say this? Well, what is the essence of handicapped parking? Is the parking somehow handicapped? Well, no. What's going on with it? Oh, it's accessible parking that people can get to very easily. So instead of emphasizing some sort of problem, we emphasize the positive. This is parking that people can use easily. We still put up the placard, but this is accessible parking rather than handicapped parking. Now, we talked about the placard itself, though. If you look at it, and this is something I'd like some audience participation, if you would, when you look at this, what sort of rhetorical messages are being given by this image? What is it saying visually? I'd like to hear from you.
Specifically the graphic, like a wheelchair?
Yes.
We have in the chat a person stuck in a wheelchair.
Okay, right. So that person is stuck. That person is very passive, right? They are just sitting there. What if we used a different image? What if instead of this, we used this? What do you think? What does this image imply?
They can move on their own and don't need someone to push them. they can, if they would like, have someone push them, but they don't have to.
Exactly. Now, we don't want to fall into the realm of trying to be euphemistic. For example, handicapable. Well, that's euphemistic. We don't want to say that. But this image suggests that, yeah, people who have handicaps, who have physical limitations, they are not just passive lumps. They can do things for themselves. Problem is, this particular image is not approved by the US Access Board. It's not approved by ISO. So we can't really use it. We have to use this very, very static image. I hope one day this will change. But the point being that sometimes the alternative style guys will point out that, yeah, stuff like this is really passive. If you can somehow show something, somebody doing something active for themselves or imply that they're doing, then go for it. Stereotypes. As we're all aware, stereotypes are a problem. I'm going to put up a piece of text, and then I'm going to show in just a second an image that goes with it. So bear with me while I read this to you. An office assistant performs a range of basic office support activities for a unit department, such as answering phones and directing calls, greeting and directing visitors, answering questions, and performing routine clerical, data entry, and/or word processing work as assigned. So this is fairly vanilla. There's nothing particularly good or bad about it. It's just, it's fairly turgid prose. I would prefer to make it into a bulleted list myself, but it is a job description. So the image I'm going to show you, I first saw in about, the year was 2004. It came out when I was getting my grad degrees at Texas Tech, and one of the school departments was looking for an office assistant. So they sent out an email to all about 50,000 students, and they had an image at top and a job description below. This was the image at top that they included. Yes, I saw Bethany make sort of a wincing face, and that was exactly what I did when I opened up that email and saw this image. It was huge. It's like, oh, Lord, no. What are you doing? Yes, this was available in the Microsoft Clip Art collection. No, it was not a good idea to use it. So it's implying that in order to be an office assistant, you have to be a white woman with tightly permed hair, wearing a pencil skirt, and a very, very short pencil skirt at that. It's a bit problematic. So we want to avoid stereotypes whenever we include language, whenever we include pictures. Stigmatic language in particular. Here's an example of something that I got the basic idea from a psychological report, and then I rewrote it to be problematic. So the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, conducted a survey in 2017 of Americans aged 12 and older. The survey revealed that drug users for most abused substances in 2016 were alcohol, cigarettes, marijuana, and pain relievers. Okay, on first read through, this doesn't seem too terrible, but then we start to take a closer look. We say, oh, wait a minute, drug users, most abused. So that's a bit stigmatic, really. Drug users. Well, what really are drug users? They're people, aren't they? So we are putting a label on these people and giving them a label that is stigmatic. We're saying, these people. Don't really want to do that. How can we fix this? Well, we could say, change the focus. Instead of talking about the people who use the drugs, we say the most consumed substances by people who misuse drugs. Or we could just say that before most frequently misused substances were, and take the idea of the people out of it entirely. So we want to avoid sticking it to people, even if we do it unintentionally. Showing equity. So I did a Google search for images of a person using a drill press. This is the first one that came up. Now, is this a good or a bad image? I'd like, again, some audience participation. Is this an appropriate image to show for somebody who is using a drill press? What do you think?
I think a common stereotype would be that this is man's work. This is for a man, not a woman. A woman can't use that, but women can. And so
Absolutely
could
women
trans
can.
people and non-binary people.
Yeah, exactly. Matter of fact, the second image that showed up when I did a Google search was the one you see on the right-hand side of the screen, the woman using the drill press. So we look at the one on the left, and we could say, well, realistically, a lot of white guys do woodworking. So is it bad to show a white man doing the woodworking? Not necessarily. At the same time, should we make more inclusive? Should we make it more broad and avoid, as you mentioned, Julia, that idea of, you know, this is men's work. Women can't do this. Well, of course, we can show a woman doing it. And then on the right-hand side there, as I said, this is the second image that came up on a Google search. So people are actually working and being inclusive and showing equity. So this is a good thing.
Also, the image on the left, it looks like he's not wearing enough PPE. Like no gloves, or he's wearing his goggles, but not hearing protection.
Ah, that is very true. Yeah, he doesn't appear to be having any earplugs on. And I can tell you from personal experience that, especially, you know, even in high school wood shop, which I took, yeah, we didn't really bother with much of this PPE. But then again, that was, golly, I'm not going to talk about how long ago that was. But the point being, yeah, is maybe not showing best practices. So on the right, the gloves, the ear protection, the eye protection, that's a really good idea. Thank you for bringing that up. I like that. Then details. Well, one of the ways we could be awesome to each other is including details only when appropriate and necessary to do so, because sometimes we would start to point fingers at people. Again, for example, I took this language from a psychology bit and rewrote it. Participants consisted of freshman engineering students from 4 different California universities in 2022 who were in their first month of studies. The initial sample consisted of 187 participants, but was then reduced to 151 because 12 Asian American students, 9 Asian students, 8 white students, 6 black students, and 1 Hispanic student did not complete the test. Well, wait a minute. Why are we even talking about the details of these people who didn't complete the test? Well, it makes no sense. So let's just cut it and say 36 students. Unless there's a specific reason that we need to specify what people did what, don't bother. Doing your homework. Doing your homework is a big deal. As I mentioned earlier, if you don't really know what to say, if you aren't sure how to say something, if you want to know, like, ooh, I'm going to offend somebody, well, look it up. Ask people. But at the same time, when you start asking people, things can get a little bit tricky. So you may have a coworker that you could go ask questions to. Is your coworker going to be open to answering your questions? It depends. Delshawn, for example, he may be absolutely delighted to tell you what it's like to be a black man who uses a wheelchair. He may just be delighted and like, somebody asked me, this is really cool. I want to share my life. Okay, great. Namrata, on the other hand, may not really want to put up with your incessant questions about Indian culture. And Corey, he's just completely over it. Don't pester him with questions about his gay life. He's just a guy. Come on, leave me alone. So it depends. Again, try to do your homework. Suss out your coworkers. If they're open, that's one thing. It's one resource you can go to. But at the same time, you definitely don't want to be that guy or that girl who keeps coming up and asking really strange and possibly insensitive questions. So there's a balancing act to be had. Last thing I'm going to say about this is do your best. You will at some time get it wrong. I know that I have got it wrong. When I was shortly out of college, this is a somewhat embarrassing story, but I'll tell it anyway. I was out of college. I was working at a YMCA, and I was the aquatics director. So one of the things I needed to do was make a list of pool rules and post them because we didn't have any rules posted. And I thought, you know, this would probably be a good idea. So I made up a list, and I posted it on the wall. And I came to work the next day, and the posters were all gone. It's like, what's going on? Who took down my post? Who stole my posters? And it turned out that I, being an insensitive clod, had put up at the very top The word Achtung, because, well, everybody remembers the word Achtung. It is a cognate from German. If you look at it, you will know what it means in English. If you remember, there's a U2 album, Achtung Baby. It was new around that time, so it had some cultural resonance. Well, it turned out that one of the patrons at the YMCA was an elderly Jewish woman, and she pointed out that, well, that's the word that all the Nazis put on their signs at the top. It's like, oh, well, gee, I'm an ass. So do your best. What I ended up doing was I went to the library, did some research, and found a word that could not possibly offend anybody. I think it came from Cherokee, K-A, ka. It means in Cherokee, pay attention. So I put that up at the top, and what do you know? Everybody who saw that poster stopped, looked at it, and they paid attention. So do your best. You will mess up somehow. Find out what the problem was and do your best to correct it. If you make honest mistakes, people will likely forgive you, especially if you do apologize. So that's what I got at the end of this presentation. This is not absolutely everything you ever need to know about supplementary style guides, but I hope it's giving you an idea of where to start anyway, the reasons why you need them, where you can get them, and some of the things that you can do with them. So thank you very much for being here, for watching, and I will be happy to take your questions.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. I'm not sure if you saw, the chat was very active. We have lots and lots of opinions on grammar rules and ways of referring to people and ourselves. Thank you so much for everything you shared. I know I got to see this for a second time, but even I forgot about the secretary picture that you shared from your clip art. So I think I'm looking back, I see lots of applause in the chat, lots of feedback. I did want to share one comment early on from Alex. Let me scroll back up. Alex, I know, was grateful for you being vulnerable and authentic with us. And he said for bringing your whole self to the presentation. So thank you for, opening yourself up to us and in our community as part of this presentation. So do we have any questions? Did I miss any questions in the chat, Julia?
I haven't seen any come through yet.
All right. Well, anyone who has a question, feel free to unmute or put your question in the chat, whichever you prefer. Because I'm trying not to monopolize it if I have questions. Yes?
Hi, this is Dr. Wendy. I don't think I have any questions at this time, but I really appreciate the different ways of searching for style guides. I'm no longer in technical communication, but I wanted to provide some input into our IT department at the organization I work for on how and why not to use terms like master slave and grandfathered and whitelist versus blacklist. And I had found some resources online, but I think this will help me provide just some more emphasis. I don't think that the IT department director has any problem with it, but I have known that other people in my organization have sort of balked at me when I said, please don't use the term master, like master list, for example. They call it the primary or the summary or the main. They're like, are you calling me a racist? I'm like, no, I'm pointing out that that's not the term that we want to use right now in our society the way it stands. And of course, this is the term you've used for 20 years in IT. That doesn't mean it's the right one. So I think having these extra resources will be very helpful to me. Thank you.
Oh, very welcome. Thank you for pointing that out. Appreciate it.
To the master slave conversation, I know I work for a security company that's a vendor of Microsoft, so we use Microsoft Style Guide and of course try to follow as many accessibility standards as we can, but we're still committed to like the master key and things like that in security, because that's what the manufacturer calls them. But one of the things that has been really important for TechCom and making things more accessible in our company is getting people to get on board with us and changing names like that by saying, you know, oh, but when we translate, it doesn't translate well. We need to use main, we need to use primary, we need to use first, because those are more easily translated by the translation company, more easily understood by our you know, workers in other regions or visitors to the data centers. So if you need help, that's always a good push, is saying, oh, but it doesn't translate the same, even if you're fibbing a little. And it works like a charm, getting people to agree with you.
That's an excellent idea. I hadn't thought of that. Thank you.
Nicole, I'm just gonna jump off of what you just said as well. I think I remember working on a project where, you know, internally everyone called it the hamburger menu, but it came up that internationally not all countries have hamburgers, so that's not the most. So I think the person who designed it initially didn't think that we would all be calling it the 3 lines, or I think we settled on menu button, but that was definitely a hot topic as well.
We do have a question from Alex in the chat. Do you have any pointers for writing fully accessible image descriptions or alt text? Should we be writing them phonetically?
I would suggest trying to use the principles of, well, 2 principles, and well, not really just individual principles, but the schools of thought. One of them is plain language. So if there's a whole, I'm not prepared to go into a dissertation on plain language, but saying things as simply as possible and as few words as possible in the most uncomplicated and easily understandable way. That, of course, sounds just like TechCom, but I don't think that going phonetically would be necessarily. You probably get a lot of pushback from people who don't even, well, how to say this? Sticklers such as myself and my mother. We would look at that and say, who wrote this? You know, can't they speak English? So I would try to perhaps use words that, you know, sound like they are spelled, for example. Another possibility is using limited, there are limited vocabularies in English. There's such a thing as, name just suddenly escaped me. I was thinking of it. And it's,
Simplified technical English?
thank you. Simplified technical English. If you can use that, that would probably be fantastic, because it takes the number of words that are possible to use, brings it down to something that is manageable for most people. So I would suggest thinking about those ideas. Yes, screen readers may mispronounce. That is indeed true. I'm thinking that this may be more of a hardware problem, or not hardware, a software problem that time will improve. But I don't necessarily know as straight up phonetics. Well, it's a good question, you know? I'm hesitant, but I see the value. And so I would say that, again, I'm hesitant, but I'd have to think about it. And you know, who knows? You may have given me a research topic.
So in ISD and the cube over next, we've been having issues with the screen reader, kind of, or the narrator, the automatic narrator within the software, getting the words right. Sometimes we'll have to add like extra H's in different places for it to read the word correctly. That's kind of like where I was going with that is,
Okay.
yeah,
So intentional misspelling, you know, misspellings to make things
exactly
sound correctly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's really interesting. I had not thought of that, and you know, I'm actually
There you go. You're
going to write that down, because
Okay.
that might be something I could do a research project on. So, thank you.
Absolutely, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, thank you for giving time to us. That will give you apparently some inspiration. Thanks, Alex, for bringing that up.
Yeah, thanks.
We have some good discussion in the text about misunderstandings across cultures and also some alt text issues. Any other questions at this point?
I guess I could say what I put in the chat. I have a lot of names of file names that I have to use that aren't words you pronounce. So what I do is I put a space between the letters so that the screen reader reads the letter as opposed to trying to make it a word.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I think I wanted to add, I really appreciated how Jonathan talked about trying. I know some people, there are some people that don't appreciate the try and will, kind of scold, I guess I'll use that term, for not getting it 100% right. But those people are not very, it's a low percentage of people. So trying, making mistakes, correcting your mistakes, and then trying again is really important. So I appreciate you mentioning that, Jonathan.
Thank you.
So Jonathan, one of the things that stood out the first time I saw your presentation that was kind of a reframing for me is that I had been focusing on inclusive communication primarily as an effort to reduce harm, I think, where I didn't want to cause harm to anyone, but I think that put me and maybe other people in a situation where I was always looking at it as sort of a avoiding negative outcomes. And so I appreciate your kind of framing it in a positive way. And I've mentioned earlier, in the mentor experience, learning from Julia, she's been a great advocate in our community for inclusive communication and encouraging us to see it as a positive way to connect with more people. So I thought it was a nice parallel for something I know personally I'm continuing to learn,
Thank you. I think that's very valuable, and I'll keep that in mind when I start talking about such things to my students. That outreach versus protecting ourselves. It's the mindset we go into. Very important. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? I see
Um,
Kate is unmuting.
You got me.
Yeah.
This isn't a question, but kind of along the line of outreach versus protection. A company I used to work for had a consultant come in for kind of sensitivity and branding. And one of the things that they flagged, and I was on the diversity and inclusion committee at the time, so this is why I heard about it, was that on the website that they talked about being a family-owned company and how to certain communities like the LGBTQ, family-owned can have a very different meaning to them in terms of conservative as opposed to, just a completely unintended association with the word family-owned that I wouldn't have thought of before they brought that up.
It's interesting, and I'm mentally comparing that with something that I heard. It was or I read about. It was a article written by a gay celebrity who had gone to Iraq during the war there, and visiting the troops and so on. And at one point, this big burly soldier came up, gave him a hug, and whispered into his ear, "I'm family," which was saying that I'm gay too, but he was at the time wasn't able to say it to his fellow soldiers. So multiple meanings, and that's really interesting. So thank you. Yes, fascinating.
Well, since I don't see other questions at the moment, though, people feel free in the chat or unmute either way. I currently work with an organization that's primarily people who speak English as a second language. So in Poland and Singapore. So usually any pushback I get on language isn't so much that they're opposed to being more inclusive, but because they are still building their comfort with the language and it can feel disruptive to them. So I did put in the chat that I'm still working on the whole translating master to main, especially for like how we use our GitHub repository, because they've acquired a comfort level with the terminology and are hesitant to take on a new term. Do you have recommendations for how to kind of navigate that, or is it just a matter of consistency?
Coming at it from my perspective, it seems to be a matter of consistency. And it could be some I'm wondering how much of it is cross-cultural as well. because we in America are not necessarily the most progressive, but in respect to many cultures, we are very progressive. So I know, Poland, for example, has a whole lot of, I don't want to call it, again, picking words very carefully.
Oh no, I understand. Yeah, we have different understandings of intercultural communication.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, how things, what, cultural values, so that maybe some of it as well, the resistance, like, well, we don't see the problem. What's your problem?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think consistency is probably the big thing. Once people are used to something, they just tend to use it.
And I'll continue to be relentless. That's my current strategy.
There's relentlessness. I like it.
Well, to be fair, I also read very American to them, so they already find me to be relentlessly positive. So it just adds to my list. Anyone else? I guess not even questions, but if you have things you'd like to share about, changes to terminology or things that you've learned about, inclusive communication. We have some stories in the chat about different experiences. I know, Kate, if you want to share yours.
I can't abide by long silences. I feel the need to fill them. Yeah, I was just saying that I did a semester abroad in New Zealand, and for one of the classes we had to read a play that the author wrote phonetically with a Brooklyn accent, which I loved, being from New Jersey. I was like, oh man, this is so good, because I can't really do one, but reading it phonetically. And then we went into class, and all of the Australian and New Zealand students hated it, because they were like, I have no idea what this said. I can't do the homework because I have no, and I just, one of the beauties of studying abroad, and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I could understand that that's not English. And if you're not familiar with the accent, you would have absolutely no idea.
Similar experience, not, vaguely similar. You all know the movie Trainspotting? It's one of my favorite movies ever, but I read the book, Trainspotting, and it's written in the Scottish vernacular. And a quarter to a third of the way of the book, I had no idea what was happening. By about halfway, I started to figure it out. But yeah, it was a slog.
Picking up all the terminology.
Jennifer, you say you were in a Soviet bloc country. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. I lived in the Czech Republic right after, actually, literally right after they split. It used to be Czechoslovakia, then it was the Republic of Slovakia and the Czech Republic, and now they want to be known as Czechia. I don't really care. Just pick a name. But everyone at the time was so desperate to learn English that if I attempted to speak in Czech, the moment I made a mistake, oh, you're American, not British, not Irish, you're American, right? And then everything was in English. And part of the reason why I was there was, part of the mission was to, build those economic bridges. And so it's like, okay, we're speaking in English. So I never really got very far in learning Czech. I mean, I know enough to get around and whatnot, but that's about it. And it's been a while. And it was very interesting. You don't realize the slang, the idioms, the colloquialisms that pepper our speech until you get so many blank looks. Like, what is this word?
I can understand that, Jen. Last week, I got called out for using the expression "save it for a rainy day," where one of the Polish developers said, "Are Americans afraid of rain? Is this something you must prepare for?"
Yes. Although, if you're in a flood zone, I get it.
I was like, sometimes, yeah, we have to take climate change seriously.
Some of the things, and I'm pretty good at being at not using a lot of colloquialisms or idioms, but they still pop up in the weirdest moments. And it was an experience, let's put it that way.
So I did have another question for Jonathan, something I wanted to ask at Summit, but I had to go to another session. I was curious what made you decide to give this a presentation to begin with for Summit particularly.
Well, a couple of things. One of them was I attended another conference and someone did a presentation about this general topic. And I thought, you know what, that's fascinating. That's really interesting. And so I decided I should look into it some. And I do teach editing. So when I teach the class, I try to bring in these ideas. So I was going to, one of the ideas I had was I want to collect some of these alternative style guides, these supplementary style guides, and bring them into class and say, all right, so we're editing for not only just for a special audience, but maybe I am editing for a special audience, not the general public, a phrase I hate, but all the same. Yeah, maybe I can use these. So I started doing a little bit of research, and when the STC call came out, it was like, oh, hey, this sounds like something I can present on. And so I just put in a presentation.
Okay, great. I was curious also how your students kind of receive this, like, guidance on inclusive editing, because I know on the professional side, we tend to talk more about resistance or challenges to moving this forward. Is it more positive on the student side?
I really haven't had a chance to do it yet. I was going to teach the editing class this semester, but situational exigencies required that I not. So I'm going to bring them in next time I teach the editing class. So I can't really answer the question as it stands
Yet.
but I can predict though that the students may give me a couple of squinty looks, but for the most part, they're going to go along with it. Students are generally, they're not monolithic by any means, but they're generally looking for the ideas of inclusion and openness. So I figure they're probably open to it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Not to lump us all into particular generations, but I know some of us have different levels of comfort with changes, especially to language.
Mhm.
I received a really nice comment from Joy saying you love bringing up the positives of inclusive language and incredibly empowering to hear and appreciate all the amazing resources.
Thank you.
And Alex brought up, what does mainstream even mean now? Sorry, earlier this week I said, oh, what is general knowledge? Julia's asked if we have any of our members of FTC, the Future Technical Communicators Student Club, who'd be willing to share what the student perspective might be on inclusive communication or inclusive editing.
I know I'm part of the communications committee at FTC, and one element of inclusive language that I've come to implement in the past couple of months is using alum instead of alumna or alumni. I just want to make sure that everyone's included and feels represented, and that they know that we would love to have them in our community.
That's a great point. Thank you, Joy.
Yeah, thank you. That is interesting. It's one of the cultural elements. How do we deal with gendered languages? Latin being a gendered language. One of the things I ran into recently was I was working on a project and had to talk about Latino, Latina. Well, do I want to use Latinx? But how many people in the community actually use that phrase? I mean, that seems to be more of an academic thing to do. So, not sure I came up with a good solution, but
Julia has her hand
Julia.
raised.
I actually have a perspective from someone in that community that I watch on YouTube sometimes. He always says, don't use Latinx. No one, to his knowledge, in the community likes that term and they find it racist.
Ah, fascinating. Well, good to know. Thank you.
I've actually heard that too.
I suppose that's one of the challenges where we're trying to address particular groups of people, but then it can be very othering sometimes. And I'm not sure, especially for those of us who maybe are not in a marginalized group or in that particular marginalized group, that sometimes our intentions, end up, misplaced. So that's why I'm getting good at apologizing sincerely for when I make mistakes. I appreciate you mentioned that in your presentation, Jonathan, that, we will make mistakes. Oh, Alex said you brought that up during a roundtable. Is there anything you would be willing to share with us about that experience, Alex?
No, it was along the same lines of what Jonathan just said. You know, it's kind of an academic term uh, within the community, and I specifically just say yes, I'm from Ecuador, so just rather than I skip the Latino part, just say specifically what country. So that we can be more specific and more inclusive that way, and it's not gendering. So.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Thank you.
Sorry, my husband's family is from Cuba, and one time he was asked, "Oh, Cuba, what part of Mexico is that?" A moment he still reflects on 20 years later.
You know, I went to the University of Maine. I sent a sweatshirt to my younger cousin in Southern California, and he wore it to school. And everyone's like, "Oh man, that's up in Canada, right?" Or no, they
Maine?
want to know what province it was in. That was it.
For
Like,
Maine?
oh Lord.
We do know Americans, we could do better with geography.
In New Zealand, one of my flatmates asked if New York was on the east or the west coast.
Oh,
Ouch.
And another friend, when they were visiting, they thought they could just hop over to California for like a weekend. I'm like, if you want a 6 hour, but conversely, Australia was a lot farther away than I expected when I was there. It's a significant plane ride. I'm like, oh, I'm just over here. Like, I should go to Australia. And it was like a big deal, and I didn't make it.
I think that's a part of what we're all reflecting on here is we have these, what we hope is not a narrow perspective, but as we start trying to broaden our perspective, the more we see these huge blind spots that we've all had, whether it's geography or language, that kind of thing. Something that Julia and I have talked about is pronouns, which is an area where I would say Julia has challenged me, and I'm working to do better as a regular, part of my life. And it's been encouraging us to have more, inclusive communications and presentations from our community, because I think we sort of had settled on the we're not harming anyone approach. So glad to be trying to do better.
Yes, and I'll just add again about the apologizing. I'd rather apologize for trying and getting it wrong than not making an attempt to do it right.
Yeah, and sometimes you can get it slightly wrong in ways that aren't necessarily harmful. My mother is obviously a generation older than me, and she called me and said, "I have met a them at the library," which was her first experience with a non-binary person, and she was quite thrilled by it. I'm like, I'm not sure that's exactly right, but the intention is positive.
Right. Yes, agreed. Try hard.
Yes. That was a few years ago. She's adapted.
And it's definitely, I think, a generational thing. Like there are a whole lot of things that my parents are trying to learn and still struggle with, but they're trying. And so that's a step better than being willfully obstinate. That doesn't mean that they don't have a long way to go, but I think, again, most people are happy that you're trying to get it right. Not that I can speak for everybody.
If you'd like, I'm happy for you to speak for me. If you'd like, you put it very well.
Oh, thanks.
Any other questions? I don't see any in the chat at the moment, but folks are welcome to ask. Oh, feedback from Alex. Alex says this was wonderful. I agree. Jonathan, I'm almost sorry that you were surprised that we were eager to have you as our presenter. I thought it was a great presentation at Summit. It was great to have it here again for those who weren't able to see it the first time.
Thank you. It's like I said, it was great to be here. And you all are wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And now you'll have to work on that idea encouraged by Alex, and we'll have to have you back, for a new presentation. All right, then I think let me go ahead and I will just screen share our closing slides. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us. I did want to share one last thing that we set up. If you have any feedback on our chapter, so for Jonathan, please give all of your positive, feedback, comments, and everything in the chat. But if there's anything about the STC Florida chapter that you would like to share anonymously, I have set up an anonymous form you can fill out if there's anything you'd like to suggest, things we could improve, things we could change. We are happy to hear from you. You also are welcome to speak to me directly if you don't want to be anonymous. We're always learning and growing. We're trying new things. I want to especially thank Julia as our Vice President, Communications Chair, Newsletter Editor, and all-around Program Planner for, keeping us moving and getting our educational programs set up for the year. So please do, also recognize Julia for her efforts as we go forward. And I wanted to thank everyone for joining us. Again, welcome to contact me. I'm at stcbethany@gmail. I will put that in the chat. And also, you're welcome to reach out to our administrative council. So that's ADCO at STC Florida. That's all of our officers. If you have ideas, if you are interested in presenting a program, we are always happy to give you a great space to present. I wanted to also mention we have past presentations on our YouTube channel. So if you're thinking, wow, I'd really love to learn more about MailChimp and using that for community engagement, we had Joy and Julie do a presentation earlier this year, and that video is on our website. So if there's anything like that, if you are looking to find a space to be a presenter, to volunteer, to contribute an article, that's what we are here for. Thank you for being with us and being a part of our community. Julie, did I miss anything?
Nope. I'm just adding the YouTube link for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, thank you, Jonathan. I'm so glad that this worked out and that you were able to be here with us and share. And from this point forward, we'll hopefully check in, see how we're all doing as we continue to improve our inclusive communication. Maybe I'll have solved the main repository dilemma with the Polish folks. But otherwise, thank you so much. And we look forward to staying in touch. And everyone, hopefully I'll see you at some of our upcoming programs. All right, thanks everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
You all take care.